Welcome everybody to Moonscapes for Wednesday, August the 26th, 2015. This will be Moonscapes number 34. First one I've done in a while. Haven't been with you since I believe it was back in June. Tonight we're using my 5-inch Maxudov Cassegrain. It's an F12 instrument, and we are using just a straight 9mm eyepiece, which gives 166 power without any zoom. I decided to go with a in-between power tonight. We've got a good clear night here, very clear air, but also that means the scene is not the best. It's not what we would call a good planetary night, lunar night. There'll be some wavering. So I decided to cut the power back a little bit. We've got plenty of zoom, as I can show you here. That big crater up in the top near 1 o'clock is Chicard. Cassendi is that crater that's in right in that circular mare there, which is Mare Humorum. But let's do a little zooming here. We'll show you what I mean. We're zooming in now right on Cassendi. Cassendi is almost center screen. You can see the sun angle is very high. We're getting on towards full moon, but this is one of my favorite times to image the moon. We have some real nice detail in the Marius Hills area, the crater Marius, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Wanted to say a few things first if you followed my site, you've known in the past that I have worked with a 10-inch telescope, a Schmidt-Newtonian. I no longer have that instrument. I'm 71 years old now, and after 40 years of having my own observatory in my backyard, I'm in retirement housing and had to give up the observatory and my larger instruments, and I made sure that 10-inch found a real good home with a real good friend of mine out in Idaho. He lives out in Idaho. He's a radiologist out there, and he's got a near professional type observatory. You know, he's got a CDK 24-inch telescope out there with top-of-the-line CCD equipment and stuff for spectroscopy. Really involved in astronomy. We became real good friends when he was doing his residency here in Connecticut. So I was very happy to find a home for that 10-inch. He'll be able to use it when he goes down to the Texas Star Party, the Okie Tex Star Party. Sometimes goes to the Florida Star Party, and that's a nice little instrument to take along. It's fairly short focal length, 40-inch. In F10, it's F4, light and easy to cart around. So he'll have a nice instrument to cart around for a while. Let's see. Wanted to mention a couple things here before we get too far along. Yeah, I've heard from a few of you people. While we're doing that, let's just take a look at some of this detail along the terminator. Some of you have contacted me on my site. There's Chicard. Look at that. Look at that. That's a beautiful looking view right there of the crater Chicard. That crater above it. I'm using a paper map here tonight because I don't have my other computer set up, which has a nice moon atlas. And this one here, I got to refer to numbers, and it's kind of a pain in the neck. But if you give me 1 second, I can give you that crater. Yeah, right. Like I can pronounce this. Phocyllides, and I'm not even going to try. But anyway, that's the name of the crater that's right on the terminator, and above that huge crater Chicard. That's a beautiful area of the moon. Let's see how much zoom we can get. We can zoom in, and we'll move this over a bit so we don't lose it. And let's keep. That's about pretty much full zoomed with the 9mm. It's not too bad. And why is that drifting on me? I don't like that, but it is. But anyway, a couple of you have contacted me and asked about Bill Bryson, and I'm sorry to say I don't have any more information than any of you out there have had. I don't know where he is and what he's up to right now. Some of you have informed me it's been almost 2 years since he's put a video up, and he's the one that got me doing these lunar videos. I'm heavily involved in other areas of astronomy, especially CCD imaging. I'm set up in my son's backyard now. I have a permanent pier set up where I keep it covered, and I just drop the telescope on, pull my car up next to the pier, run the wires in the car, and I sit inside my car, as I think I've told you before, and do these videos. So they're pretty comfortable, and it's almost like having my observatory in my warm room from a few years back. But it's not quite the same as the big observatory and the big observatory equipment where I could do some really serious work. I've done serious research work in the past, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. In fact, if I stop and think about it, come September 8th of 2016, which is, well, now it's a little bit less than a year away, next August, I'll have been in amateur astronomy for 60 years. That's a long time. Had a lot of fun. And in fact, I think if you've perused some of my videos, you actually saw I did write a short memoir. It was intended to be an open letter to my family. It ended up getting published. Long story to that. But if any of you are interested in it, the name of it is Waxing and Waning, a Memoir of an Amateur Astronomer. It's available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all them. You can get the Kindle version for about $3, and if you wanted to pay a full paperback version, I think it's on the order of $17 now. Anyway, it's the story of my life and my desire to be a professional astronomer and how I ended up being an amateur. Didn't have the smarts to get the degrees needed for professional. Here's a nice view of Tycho. High sun angle, so we're not getting the real good relief that we would normally get. But really, still a nice view. I'm going to back off a little bit. But getting back to Bill, it's really a shame. Bill, like I say, he was the one that got me into doing these videos along with my CCD imaging. And he's the man when it comes to this. His enthusiasm just shines through. It's really amazing. I mean, Bill and I have some differences in opinion about the moon. He believes in life on the moon and some other things like that. I don't. I'm more of a serious guy, serious science type. And but you know, so what? That's what it's all about. And I enjoyed watching Bill's videos. He just his enthusiasm just shone through. And I also hope Bill is doing well. I hope he's fine. And the only thing I did hear way back when there's Copernicus, high sun angle, not very much going on. You can see the nice ray patterns there. But I thought I heard from somewhere along the line that he was taking a little bit of a break and that he was getting his license for amateur radio. So that could be, and maybe he'll be back. And Bill, if you're out there, I know you got a lot of people that miss you, so it'd be nice to see some more videos from you. Here we're coming down back to the northern area of the moon, the Sinus Iridium area. We can zoom in on that a little bit. I had a couple things I wanted to touch. I'm not going to go deep into lunar detail tonight. We're just going to kind of zoom around and enjoy the view. The color setting I have right now is right about halfway, so you can see there is some color in those Mar areas. They tend to be bluish, and then they take on that yellow-brown. Again, there's always that argument, how much of it is real, how much of it is in the camera. But we definitely are pushing the envelope as far as color goes. So, I mean, the eye does not see that kind of color. The camera is probably exaggerating it, but it probably is real to a certain extent. In fact, if we look for our good old friend, the line between Mare Tranquillity and Mare Serenitatis, which should be up in here someplace, we'll probably see a very nice coloration difference. I believe it's up in here. Let's see. I'm having a little trouble controlling this, where I want to go here with this. There we go, and I believe it's up, and nope, wrong way. I believe it's over in here. Yeah, there it is. There it is. Notice the blue up on top and the brownish yellow, or even yellowish brown on the bottom. That always stands out really well, and that is definitely a color difference. So again, but the camera does a great job of exaggerating that color. Let's go back more to some of the Terminator detail, which is a bit more interesting with the shadow. Again, Copernicus. There's Kepler, beautiful ray pattern, and this is one of my favorite spots on the moon. The crater right near the center now is Marius, and notice the wrinkled ridging behind Marius, the little humps. Those are the Marius Hills. They're actually cinder cones, and I think I've mentioned this before. There you get a real good view of it. Marius is in the center, and those little pimply ridges in the back are the Marius Hills. And I believe as one of the next Apollo missions that was supposed to head for this area, but of course the program was canceled before that happened, unfortunately. It would have been a very interesting area to visit. I've seen the overhead photography from the Apollo era, and that's a very, very interesting area. And then down here is my favorite area, Schroeder, that brilliant white crater, which indicates a young impact. Schroeder's Valley, that snake-like valley running out of it. And this area of the moon has been suspected of have changing color at times. It really hasn't been proven. A lot of it sometimes is the observer, his eye gets fooled. They have not really been able to prove any type of outgassing from here that I'm aware of anyway, that is real. But it's as you can see, there is a coloration difference. The mountainous areas around Aristarchus, I believe, maybe I misnamed that and called it Marius. We were talking about Marius before, but the bright crater is Aristarchus. And notice the mountainous area around it is greenish, and the Mar floor is more of a dark grayish or brownish gray or whatever. But there's definitely a color variation. One thing I wanted to talk about tonight, and it's part of the perusing I did around various sites when I'm not observing, and different people with different views. There's Kepler again up on top, nice view. And I guess I have to say I really kind of get a little bit irritated when I see people really knocking NASA and how they're lying to us and all this stuff. And well, I'm a strong backer of NASA, and I don't believe any of that. And to me, I think the main problem that we have today with people who tend to kind of think along those lines is we have what basically is a 24-hour news cycle. In other words, something that is in the news today is going to be out of the news tomorrow, and you're not even going to hear about it, in most cases. Now, here we are back at Cassini. Take just recently the New Horizons probe that went by Pluto. That had legs. That lasted a little bit longer. The news media was pretty interested in that because we have never been to Pluto. It was the first probe to go by Pluto. And they actually start covering it, a week, 10 days out. And it was still, millions of miles away from Pluto. And the imagery was, so-so. It was better than anything we'd ever had before, but it was just so-so. The best images came the night before closest approach and closest approach. And right after closest approach, the news media, as far as they're concerned, it's over. The probe's gone by Pluto, and boom, that's it. And the general public gets to see a few images taken from a far distance, and only one or two close-up ones. And their opinion is, oh, geez, what's so good about this? NASA spends all this money, and this is all we get. Well, it's the news cycle. They're not following it. It's going to take over a year to get that data down, and the high-definition data down. It'll take over a year, and that's in compressed form. And then after they do that, then they're going to download again and in uncompressed data, and that's where you're going to find your real interesting detail. But where this story really hits home for me is talking about Mars. If you remember, we had the Spirit and Opportunity probes to Mars. Very successful. They landed in 2004. Both probes were supposed to have 90-day lives. Well, Spirit lasted till I think 2011, so that's 7 years that it lasted. Opportunity is still functioning now, today, 14 years after landing, and it was designed for a 90-day mission. But that's not the mission I want to touch on that really shows the problem with the 24-hour news cycle. And that is with the Curiosity lander that we landed 3 years ago on Mars. That was the one, remember, that's about the size of an SUV. We're working our way up here to the South Pole of the moon. We'll see what's up on top here. And it had that very, very tough landing. Look at that double ray pattern from Tycho there. And it was landed by that sky crane where the individual parts of that were tested on Earth, but it was never tested in full until its actual landing on Mars. Well, that probe, what people that kind of, give NASA a hard time and call them liars, and I saw lots of comments right after the landing is, what's NASA doing? All this money, millions of dollars, and all we get is black and white, low definition camera. That's all we get. I mean, no high definitions. Well, what they don't realize is when the probe landed, the first imagery that comes down is engineering data. It's just engineering cameras. They're there. They'll give you a quick overlay of the site where they've landed, and they're also there so they can check out instrumentation on Curiosity rover itself. If there's a problem with the deployment of some instrument, they can use these engineering cameras and image them, figure out what went wrong, and possibly, and most times, correct it. Fortunately, everything worked perfectly. Everything worked perfectly. But the very first images we saw that first night of landing, they weren't high definition. They were just the engineering cameras. Well, like I say, the 24-hour news cycle, Curiosity landed successfully. The news loses interest, puts no more out. And the Curiosity rover actually had to go through a series of testing to certify everything, make sure it was working. And then the high-definition cameras and color camera and color work all comes into play. And the beautiful imagery coming down from there, and the general public isn't seeing it unless they go searching for it because it's not in the news anymore. Now, if you aren't aware of it, some of you, I'm sure a lot of you are, but if you're not aware of it, there's a site called the Astronomy Picture of the Day. And if you just search Astronomy Picture of the Day, it's a website, and they put a new astronomical image up every day. I believe it was about 2 weeks ago. There was a gorgeous high-definition image from the Curiosity rover of Mount Sharp, its destination. It was at the foot of Mount Sharp, looking up at it, and the definition and quality was just beyond belief. And for science geeks like me, you look at that image and you just want to be able to walk into it and go explore it. It's that amazing. And that's what a lot of these people that, jump all over NASA and say, what are they doing? All this, and all they have is low definition, black and white. Well, you didn't give them time to, check the probe out and get it up and everything up and running, and check out the high definition work when it comes down. And I blame our news media for that because they just lose interest so fast that I will admit I have seen a couple of news stories where they've put some latest images up, but you don't see them too often. So if people that don't follow it real closely aren't going to see them. So they still have in their mind that all NASA did was sent the probe up there with a black and white camera. And it's really a misunderstanding. They're not understanding what's going on. There's work that has to be done. Things have to be checked out, and those are just engineering camera shots. Those first images that came down. And then after everything is checked out, the high definition work kicks in, and we're off and running. We're back here at Chicard and that crater that I cannot pronounce, but look at that crater up above, the one that's up near 12 o'clock, and look at the shadow throw on that. The mountain that's on the left-hand side of the crater, half the crater floor is in deep shadow, which indicates a very high ridge on the upper left-hand side of that crater, and yet the bottom half of the crater floor is in sunlight. So that indicates a very high ridge on that. Let me see. That's going south. That's the south side of that crater. North is to the bottom in this view, and south is up. Yeah, excuse me. I just wet my whistle here with some iced tea. But anyway, that's me again on my soapbox. I just wanted to point that out. It's something that's always kind of bothered me. How the people just, they don't, they're not familiar with the science, with NASA, and so they miss what's, the big picture, what's really going on. And what I don't like is that they jump all over NASA and call them a bunch of liars, and in reality, it's just they really haven't paid attention to the program and aren't up to speed on what's really going on. So I thought I'd just throw my 2 cents in there on that. I'm just wondering here, did I have, I'm not, oh yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to bring up for sure. We have a total lunar eclipse coming up on September the 27th. The penumbral eclipse starts early in the evening, and that you really don't see much of anything until it's almost ready to start into the partial phases. We'll work down along the terminator here as I'm talking again. The partial eclipse, the dark umbral shadow, starts crossing the moon at 9:07, and totality starts at 10:11, and totality ends at 11:23 p.m. This is on the night of Sunday, September 27th. Now, I have plans to try to image that, but I have a major problem. My wife and I are leaving the very next day for Florida. We live in Connecticut, and we're flying down to Florida. My son has been down there for about 5 years now. He got a big promotion, was moved to Florida, and instead of being a mile or two away like it used to be, he now lives in Florida, and we're flying down for 2.5 weeks. And the scheduling I'm going to have is going to be very, very tight. I'm not sure I can image and get the image posted and be ready to make the flight the next morning. So we'll see about that. If I can possibly do it, I will, but there's also a good possibility that I may miss that eclipse and not be able to image it. And on top of it, here I am in Connecticut and New England, and our weather, you can never tell. So, we may not even have a good night to do it. I always love this shot right here. That, again, is Kepler. That has got a very, very pronounced ray structure to it. And if we continue on up farther and we go to Copernicus, you can see Copernicus's ray structure. It's more extensive, but for some reason to me, Kepler's seems to stand out a little better. And yet it was a smaller impact. And if we continue to work on over, if we get over to, let's go look at the Apennine Mountains. In this high sun angle, that's Sinus Iridium, so we got to go up and this way. There's Plato. The Apennine Mountains, now this is really interesting. See that arc, the big C shapes that kind of points down towards the lower right-hand corner? That's the ring of the Apennine Mountains, and they are so stark with detail with a low sun angle, but look at the high sun angle of almost a full moon, and they almost totally disappear. There's no shadow, so we don't have the relief, and so you don't get the real good view of it. But it's interesting to see the difference between a low sun angle where the detail is really, really great, and Let's get in a closer look. We'll go up to the area. Let's see. Let's get up in here. Here, you can see it now extends from the middle of the frame down over to the lower right-hand corner. You can see that white line. That is the Apennine Range, and it just blends into the background with the sun angle being as high as it is. We're zoomed in pretty much all the way. Let's back her out. As I see, I'm 25 minutes in as usual. I can't believe how fast time goes when I do one of these. I wanted to get one of these videos up. Like I say, coming up, we're only about 5 weeks away from our trip to Florida. That'll take us into October. I have a bunch of CCD imaging work that I want to do in the coming months, so my time's going to be split more heavily towards the CCD imaging. So I just don't know how many of these lunar images or videos that I'll be getting up leading into the fall. And as you know, here in Connecticut, I generally stop doing videos when we get deep into the winter because it's just too brutally cold, and the amount that I use is the Orion Atlas EQG, and I have not done any upgrading to it. And the original mount, the way I run it, it doesn't like the cold weather, and the axis, it will actually lock up in the winter in the bitter cold. So I just find it better to take the mount off for a couple months, take a little bit of a break. And as I said, I'm getting up there in age, and I think I've mentioned many times before about my back issues. They're really bad, and so it gets a little harder for me to do some of this stuff. But after 60 years, I still really enjoy it. But anyway, I wanted to get this video up definitely, as I say, because it's been almost 2 months, and just wanted to talk about a couple of things. I wanted to mention Bill Bryson and let you know also that I have no idea what happened, and hopefully he's well, and hopefully he'll be back. Don't know. I have no idea. I don't know if anybody's had any luck trying to contact him or not. I know he contacted me a couple times when I first started, and we actually corresponded back and forth a few times, but I haven't heard from him since then, so I don't know either. But anyway, that's about it for tonight, really. There's just a lot of nice detail right along this thin terminator as we're approaching just a couple days from full moon. And let's go in one more time to the Marius Hills area, as long as we've got them here tonight. As I say, this is one of my favorite areas of the moon. It's really an interesting area, and here we're zoomed in pretty good. And here, I like this view here because over on the left side you have Aristarchus, Schroeder's Valley, and on the right side is Marius, and with those pimply-looking background, the Marius Hills, which are actually cinder cones. They look like they're volcanic cinder cones. And as I said, the Apollo program had planned to go visit that area, but the program was cut before they got that far. So I guess that's about it for this tonight. I hope everybody is doing well out there. I've seen a couple comments about people being excited about this type of work and starting some on their own, and that's great. It's lots of fun. I find myself having a lot of fun doing this. It's relaxing, and it gives me kind of a break of doing the serious work. CCD imaging is much more involved. You spend hours accumulating data or light into the camera. The camera is monochrome, and to get color images you need to take in the RGB sequence. In other words, you use a red filter, green filter, blue filter, so you're imaging. And then you use what's called a luminous, which actually contains most of the detail of the image. You generally like to get as much data in that image as possible, and you use that as the basis, and then apply shorter exposures in red, green, blue over top of that in a computer processing program. and it spits out the final image, which you computer process, which is a color image. Some of the best images in the world today are produced by very, very talented amateur astronomers right here in Connecticut. Robert Gendler from Avon has actually processed some of the NASA images, the Hubble Space Telescope images, and he developed the LRGB series, which is the luminous, white luminous picture as a background to build up a lot of detail, and then the red, green, blue over top of it. I believe he was, if he wasn't the one who developed it, he was in on it very, very early, and was the one that really got that process where it is. So guys, with that, I'm going to say good evening. Nice being back with you. Hope you enjoyed this little bit of tour and my little bit of lecture on NASA and the 24-hour news cycle, and why a lot of people get confused and think NASA's putting up some cheap cameras and wasting a lot of time, when it's just engineering data, and the news media has lost interest because the fantastic landing has taken place, and that's all they cared about, and they don't spend much time getting the real good high-definition, beautiful color imagery out once everything is checked out and they start the real science. And it's a shame, too, because a lot of the general public misses out on that then. So with that, guys, I'm going to say good evening. Great being back with you. Good health, clear skies. And hopefully we'll see you for that eclipse. I can't guarantee it. As I said, we're heading off to Florida the very next morning, so that's really a tight scheduling for me. But we'll see. So take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you later.